Our sponsors for this episode are Charleston Insurance Agency. Charleston Insurance Agency is located at 1021 Washington Road, Suite 200 in Newton. Doesn't matter whether you already have insurance or looking to insure something new. You should give Patrick a call and find out what they can do for you at 316-804-4945. That's 316-804-4945 or stop by 1021 Washington Road, Suite 200 in Newton. Customer valued, family owned, locally operated, Charleston Insurance Agency. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of HCTalk. As always, I'm your host, Lance Gormley. We have a special guest, Captain Brian Huntley from the Harvey County Sheriff's Department, on with us today. How are you doing today, Brian?
Good.
Good. We had to fight rain and everything else going on just to get here to make sure we could get this done. So if you hear anything in the background, like the rain on the roof, just let that get you in the groove, so that way you can listen to the podcast and stuff. But recently I reached out to Brian and asked if there was any way that he would like to come on the program, talk about his life, how his career has just transformed over time, and where he became where he is now. For those that are watching, Captain Huntley is basically runs the detention center. Is that a correct statement?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay, so how I like to start out any program, if anybody's watched, they all know that I really like to get a feel of who the person sitting in front of me is, where you came from. Are you a lifelong Harvey County resident, maybe Newton? Just if you'd like to share with the audience a little bit about yourself, about where you're born, where you came from, and how you found yourself here today.
Yeah, so I am a lifelong Harvey County resident, born and raised in Newton. Went to Newton High School, graduated 2001. I actually got into law enforcement a couple years after high school. My uncle was worked for the sheriff's office for a little over 20 years, actually. My brother, Brandon Huntley, at that time when I got into working at the jail, was on the Newton Police Department, and so it was just kind of something that was interesting. Kind of ran in the family. My dad was a railroader, so it was kind of either one or the other for me. At that time, I interviewed for the railroad, and I interviewed for the sheriff's office, and the sheriff's office called first. So I went that route and just really developed a passion for it from day one. Yeah. So when going back to the high school transition into career, did you was college in there? Did you think about that, or was it really just kind of falling in the two categories of, well, I'm either going to be a railroader or I'm going to be a sheriff's officer? Well, actually in high school I did machine technology. Okay. I did a short stint after high school working in a machine shop locally here in Newton. And it just really, after a couple years doing that, it just wasn't for me.
Yeah.
I lost interest in it, and so it was either back on railroad or law enforcement.
Okay. So when you applied to the sheriff's department, and did you? I guess the question I'm asking is, did you feel like you wanted to go one way or the other? I mean, or was it just kind of whichever came first?
Yeah, when I applied, it was 2 months after Kurt Ford was killed, and so that was really kind of lit a fire under me at that time. So I would say the sheriff's office was definitely my main focus at the time I applied, because that, like I said, when Kurt was killed, it really, the community really rallied at that time, and so it kind of awakened something inside of me then to seek it out.
Yeah, well, especially having family in law enforcement. I mean, like you said, your dad, and then, or was it your dad you said, or
my uncle worked for the sheriff's
your uncle
office.
And then your brother. So
yeah.
Your brother was a law enforcement officer during that time. Then when that transpired, so
yeah.
That not only hit our community hard, but hit the law enforcement community really hard. Yeah. At the time, my sister was a Harvey County Sheriff's deputy, worked for the Detention Center. Okay. And so she had a real good working relationship with Kurt. I'm from Heston. he was the chief of police when I was a kid, you know.
Yeah.
So a lot of people really appreciate Kurt. You know, his memory will live on forever in our community, and just knowing that we had such a great person that really did take to heart to serve the public. And then after that, I think that changed a lot of people's lives and perspective of a lot of people when it came to law enforcement, and then the desire to want to serve. So that was a pivotal moment in your life.
Yeah.
Okay. When you say you started with the Harvey County Sheriff's Department, was that with the intent to then go and be a road deputy?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Okay.
I don't think anybody starts at the jail with intents to stay there.
Okay.
And so that was always my goal, would be to go patrol. I think at that time my uncle was still with the sheriff's office on patrol, and my plan was to, when he retired, was to take his number, his badge number. So.
Yeah. Okay, so you get hired on. I think part of the process, generally speaking, if I'm not mistaken, and correct me if I am, but that if you don't have previous law enforcement background or certification and come over directly to the sheriff's department, then the pathway is to first go through the detention center, correct?
It doesn't. You don't have to.
Okay.
It is a great place to start, especially for people coming right out of high school. A lot of people don't know you can start at the jail at 18, and work your way up. And then when you're 21, you're eligible to go patrol. Patrol has hired people with no experience. It just depends on how you interview, and law enforcement over the years, we used to have applications that, hundreds of applications to sort through, and with the climate of how law enforcement's viewed in society today, those applications have dwindled quite a bit, and so we've had to look at non-certified people for patrol, as well as people right out of high school for detention. So.
Yeah. Okay, so you get the call. You know that you're going to be a detention officer. I'm thinking you probably had a little bit of knowledge previously because of family of what you could look to expect from that. But just give me I just want to take you back to the first day that you walked in the door to the detention center, and you knew this was going to be what my occupation was. This is my day to day.
A long time ago. It was exciting. Starting something new. Like I said, a long time ago. It'll be 20 years this June that happened. So, it's kind of hard to think back that far, but just the only thing I can think of is I was excited to start.
Yeah. For people that, have never been to the Harvey County Hilton, as some might call it, right?
Yeah.
Or the Harvey County Detention Center. For somebody, what could you describe kind of what that is like? Like, say somebody's never obviously had to stay there. They've never been in law enforcement or been a detention officer. So, you're in there. There's sights, sounds, and things that are taking place during that time. Can you just give maybe your perspective to the audience about what that might be like?
Well, it's a jail, so it's not the quietest of places. It's loud. It's bright. We got lights everywhere. It's noisy. You got people yelling. You have people screaming sometimes. We have mental health issues throughout, and a lot of those people get kept up in the holding area so that we can keep an eye on them, and so that's typically the louder area. When you come in, you go through the booking process if you're on the inmate side of things, and it's a lot of paperwork, a lot of questions, just getting processed in, getting all your information, getting fingerprinted and all those things. Then you get to use the phone and try to bond out or contact your people to let them know what's going on. We try to keep it as professional as possible. We try to treat people with respect and dignity. As long as you come in with and you treat us with respect, we're going to treat you with respect.
Yeah.
That's the big thing of it. But nobody ever wants to be there. Jail's not a place people want to go.
Yeah.
And so typically we're dealing with people that are experiencing some of the worst moments of their life, and they project that, and we're typically the people that they're going to project that to, and we understand that, and so we have thick skin, and we try to let it roll off as much as possible, and try to get you through it. That's kind of our job.
Yeah. So it's not a Hilton.
No.
I say that facetiously or jokingly,
that was the term back in the day, the Harvey County Hilton.
I don't even know if they use that anymore.
I haven't heard
call it the Harvey County Ramada Inn.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know.
Not as much. Yeah, that was definitely a term that was used
in the jail's better days.
Yes.
Right? Yeah. I love it. Okay. No, I don't love it. But anyway, okay. So, through this process, you said that you've been involved there like 20 years is what you're going on. So, I always ask guests things like, what was your greatest challenge, and then what was, something that's the most rewarding thing. One might be easier to think about than the other, but just to kind of frame it in that way, was there ever a time when you experienced something there and you were like, yeah, this is not for me, or this is the toughest day on the job?
I don't know that I ever had a moment of doubt that I was on the right path. I've definitely had challenging days, definitely had times where I had no idea what I was doing, but never questioned whether or not I should be doing it. But you just keep going forward, and figuring things out, and learning and growing.
Yeah. And over time, do you feel like it's kind of an on-the-job deal where maybe in the beginning you have some training and you hadn't experienced a situation, maybe you could have done it different, or maybe you would have provided a different outcome for the situation or something. But as you've been on the job long enough, you've built more tools and you've seen so much that it becomes...
Oh, sure. Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you're involved in anything, you go back later and you think about how you could have reacted, how you could have done things differently, and earlier in your career, you react more emotionally, you react more with adrenaline and excitement, and now later, I don't get that tunnel vision. I kind of sit back and guide people. I'm the older guy now, and so my body doesn't heal as quickly. And so if we do have an incident, I'm generally the one at the back directing traffic, hey, grab him here, and making sure that nobody's going too far, and people are staying focused, and trying just to make sure people are staying safe. That's kind of what I do now versus before. I'd be the first one in the door to try to control something, and didn't worry about the aftermath of what my body was going to think later. Now it's like, if it's going to hurt for a few more days than it used to. So, but no, I don't know that I ever look back and I mean, I get questioned. You always question things that what you could do better, I think.
Yeah. Okay. So speaking of this, and I just interjecting myself or projecting myself into your shoes or the situation, because of the clientele, I guess you could call it, and I don't know what the situation, you had touched on it earlier, that a lot of people that cross your path in your professional responsibilities are not having their best day, are not having the best time in their life. I want to ask the reward or the positivity. Like, can you give me like something that is positive, or you feel like in your own personal life that is the rewarding aspect of what it is going on right now? Or?
It's not as probably prevalent as you get on patrol. You get a lot, I think, more affirmation from the public being out in the public, and being in detention, we're kind of hidden away. And the people we're going to see are the people that come to jail. And so we don't get a lot of that, thank yous and affirmations from people. But occasionally, I mean, we gotta have to find our rewards sometimes. But occasionally we get them, and they're really nice. I've had inmates that we've dealt with for years or come to me down the road and say, we had a conversation once, and you helped me. You helped me turn things around. And those are the moments that it's like, well, good. I recently, matter of fact, just had we had an inmate from a long time ago send me a message on Facebook, and he just talked to me about how, he felt like I gave him a shot, that I didn't just look down on him, and I felt like I saw something in him, and we just talked like a human being. Yeah. And he's doing really well now, and he just wanted to let me know that. And I was like, and I just told him, I think that's really great. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah. So those are the rewards that I look to, and when I hear people say that I made some small impact on their life, and that's what I count as a reward. So
yeah, well, you got to think when people are at their lowest point. It's like you mentioned maybe it interjected something in their life, and they were at their lowest point. Sometimes that can be the biggest thing, right? Yeah. Just a simple, small act of kindness. Not saying that you need to go around ensuring that somehow or another you're imparting some wisdom or good times, or because obviously you don't have any control over who finds themselves in front of you, right? Your responsibility is not to be the judge, the jury, or the arresting officer. It's to do your duty, which is to ensure that if this person finds their way here for whatever the reason, that treat them in a respectful manner, and do what we need to do for the safety of staff and situation. Yeah. So, okay. So just understanding the jail situation, a while I've been not part of this conversation, but it wasn't so long ago that I went and I actually toured the facility, saw some of the things that Sheriff Gay had talked about that were some concerns or the potential for some needed upgrades, if you want to look at it that way. That conversation has still been circulating. We recently had a town hall that you were at, and I appreciate that, just to be there to answer questions to the public about things. But it seems like this conversation about the detention facility continues to happen, right? And I don't know if it's because the need just continues to get greater as the day goes by, or whether it's a situation where it's getting more attention because of the financial expenditure that may need to be invested. So just can you kind of explain, 20 years ago you were dealing with a different facility.
Yeah.
Fast forward 20 years, now you're dealing with a 20-year-old facility. Would you feel comfortable just explaining some about the facility and how it's changed over the last 20 years?
Sure. And it's more than just the facility itself. It's corrections in general that's changed over the last 20 years. The way we do things. When I started 20 years ago, jail was a place you just put people until they were ready to behave, or they were sober, and they can go back in society. And now that's not what jail's function is anymore. Even when I started, we had some minor failures going on at the jail with mechanical issues, but now it's the mechanical problems or the functions of the jail are what is really starting to fall apart. The bones are good, the bricks are good. It's the mechanicals, the plumbing, the doors, the systems that are failing us. The jail wasn't built by a corrections specialist when it was built, and so it wasn't really built to withstand what it needed to withstand. The numbers we've been told is that jails age at about 4 to 5 times that of a normal building, because it is 24/7. It is harsh conditions. It is never ending. Everything in a jail is heavy. It's built thick. It's built to try to withstand force. So, for instance, cell doors that are separating from the cinder blocks. That's one of the big issues going on. Some of the other issues are when the jail was built, we have 2 medical cells, which are very much needed. But like today, as a matter of fact, we have I have 3 people that need medical cells, and I only have 2. And so we have to triage. We have to pick and choose who's the worst case that needs those cells more than the other, and then we have to basically turn a holding cell into a makeshift medical unit that's not built for it, and find ways to accommodate people that have to be confined in jail but also have medical needs. And it's difficult. It's very difficult. And, the one thing that I don't want people to think is that we don't need to make jail comfortable for people that have done bad things, and because that's not what we're trying to do. The jail is a tool for us to do our job, and it makes it really hard for us as corrections officers to do our job without the proper tools. And it'd be like patrol officers telling them to go out and do their job and not giving them a baton or handcuffs. It's the same thing for us. We need certain things to do our job efficiently and effectively, and that's kind of the best way I can equate that.
Yeah. Well, and I'll give an experience. I had just mentioned how at one point I went and toured the facility, and not saying anything negative about the facility or anything, but to speak to what you're saying. As I was getting this tour, freely walking around with Sheriff Gay and I believe another officer, I think it was you actually, were there for the majority of the time.
Maybe possible.
We came upon 2 different doors specifically, and there's a procedure where you push a button and you have a main control, and the main control unlocks the door for you to get from one section to the other, and it's probably sectioned out that way for security reasons, understandably so. But we were standing there pushing the button once. Yeah. We're trying, we're pushing the button again. And after about 3 or 4 times of waiting, the first thing that dawned on me was, if there was an incident right now that was taking place with an officer in this other portion, and the need was there to have an immediate assistance right away, and you're standing at a door that won't unlock, and that time is ticking, and that's seconds, that's minutes going by, trying to get from one location to the next to help an officer that's in need, first and foremost, well, we're in trouble. Yeah. That was it was an eye-opening experience to me to say, well, the plumbing, I understand, needs to be fixed. Right. Yeah, there are things that need to be fixed here, but like you're talking about, the doors and the access in an emergency situation, what then?
Yeah, and I've been in those situations over my career, and that's incredibly frustrating when you are trying to get to one of your coworkers who's involved in an incident, and you're stuck between a door, but you can see them and you can hear them, but you can't. You have to wait for that door to get open before you can get to them. I've been in those situations, and they are frustrating for sure. And thankfully, we've never had anything get completely out of control for us, but that possibility is always there.
Yeah. Because, this takes me to my next question. There's become over time, especially in the last 20 years. More mental health awareness, and not excusing a situation to say that if somebody had or was in a mental health crisis that their behavior and their actions are somehow justified or should be mitigated, but they ultimately might find themselves in the detention center. So when you're talking about medical cells, what are you talking about cells that are able to accommodate people who have or are in a mental health crisis?
So, depends on the crisis. So, what we don't have any padded cells, which we need. That would help out with people who are trying to self-harm, which we get frequently. The 2 medical cells we have are more for chronic care, and they're self-isolated. They have reverse air filtration, which helped out with COVID, but not to the magnitude that we needed. But the two we have is more for chronic care.
Okay.
But we do have a lot. Like we have one right now waiting for to transport out to Larned, who's been in crisis for the last 2 weeks, but he's on a waiting list, and he's just in a holding cell that we have to monitor and just try to wait to get him to the state hospital.
Which can accommodate their care, basically,
Right.
at that point.
Right. I mean, we do what we can, but yeah, we can't really accommodate them. We just do what we can, and try to keep them as safe as possible, and talk to them, and just do what we can.
It's mental health awareness. 20 years in corrections, understanding the need for more accommodating medical cells that could help not only with the population you're talking about with the reverse air filtration system, so that way whatever sickness they're experiencing is not then just circulated all over the jail for everybody to get sick, including yourselves, obviously, in the exposure there. Have you found that over the last 20 years that it's quite well? I mean, I'm not going to put just over the last 20 years. Have you seen more individuals that are experiencing a mental health crisis, such as self-harm, and the need for there to be accommodating cells for those individuals? Because, and I'll let you answer that question, because I kind of wanted to paint a picture too.
Oh, for sure. I think it goes beyond that. I think we need facilities to accommodate the mental health crisis growing in this country. When I started 20 years ago, it wasn't this bad. We didn't have this problem in corrections. This has been something that's been growing for some time, and it's the problem is it's falling more and more on detention centers and jails to address, and that's where the struggle is, because a lot of our detention centers aren't equipped for it, and we're trying to scramble to figure out how to do it.
Yeah. And so you talked about an individual 2 weeks into a mental health crisis, just to kind of come down this road a little bit farther. They're in a situation where they have to be close, right, because of the potential for self-harm. The facilities don't accommodate, them self-harming, right? Because obviously if it's concrete and steel, it's not hard to hurt yourself by, trying to utilize the concrete
Right.
and the steel against yourself. You know, I mean, that's, we can all imagine how that could happen. You're in a lag time to get them where they need to be. I would think that, when someone's in a crisis of self-harm, that's a very tightrope to walk to harming others. Mm-hmm. So then they're in there, you're trying to prevent them from self-harm. Let's say they're going through a crisis. At that point in time, is that when corrections officers are most vulnerable to the potential for an individual? Like, for instance, if you had a cell where it was padded and that they're in there and that they might be going through a mental health crisis, but they can't hurt themselves. If you then, currently, they're in a mental health crisis, they're trying to self-harm, the same concrete, the same steel that they're using to harm themselves, you have to interject. Mm-hmm. So does that increase the likelihood that officers can be injured or harmed at that point when trying to make sure that person's not harming themselves?
Well, absolutely. Anytime you're dealing with somebody in crisis, you don't know what they're capable of or what they're going to do. And so anytime we have to go in to try to prevent that, the likelihood of them becoming combative is always elevated.
Okay. Well, do you have any problems getting down to like some financial stuff? I know, like we had talked about. Okay, not so much dollars and cents, but I know that part of the discussion that's transpired is the need for improvements. Mm-hmm. I know that there was one possibility presented at one point in time that a lot of people were like, "Wow, that's just that's a lot of money." Okay, yeah. So then it came back with there's another possibility, not so much money, but still a lot of money.
Right.
And then I think there's a happy medium
Right.
that then has come about where it's, okay, well, this kind of takes some off of this and adds some to this. I guess if you want to touch on that to be a little bit more in detail on that, please do. But otherwise, I guess I could follow that up with a question that you could answer in the same breath. And that's, where are we at here? I mean, is something going to be done, and should something be done, or do you feel like it's a have to?
Yeah. So I guess I'll start with the options that were presented. We did have a company come in, do an evaluation of the jail, and they came up with 3 initial options. The first option was immediate, what needs to be immediately addressed for safety, and that is what is the $9 million option. Basically comes in, fixes all the stuff that's broken, does some minor, some basic security, safety upgrades to the facility. And it basically takes what we have and makes it new again. It doesn't bring us into modern day corrections. I don't think it answers our needs for the future of corrections. The next option they presented initially was was all of that, plus the additional was the upgrade into modern day corrections, and I want to say that came out to like $29 million, and it was all the bells and whistles, more holding facility, more holding cells, medical cells, special management cells. A new master unit, a drive-through Sally Port, all kinds of really nice things. And then the third option was a brand new facility and what that would cost, without considering purchasing any land. And that came out to, I think, $32 million. We didn't really explore a whole lot of that option. I know the sheriff and the commissioners, they're not really keen to that. They like the location of the jail, and then and that's, I don't disagree. That's a great place to keep it. Everything's attached. So, and I think unless you're looking at a long-term plan of building a jail and then attaching a sheriff's office and then attaching a courthouse on a long-term goal, it probably need to keep it where it's at. So we met with commissioners. That would have been probably a little over a year ago with those 3 plans. And at that time, I think it was Commissioner Haig requested to see the second option reduced to something under $20 million. And so we went back to the drawing board with the architects, and I sat down with them, and we moved some things around, we cut some things off, and we got it to $17 million and some change. But still we're able to capture those medical cells, increased our initial holding cells, got those special management cells, and really still captured all those things we need to bring us into modern day corrections to make us successful for the next potentially 30 years. Because I think that's the goal, is to get us another 30 years down the road in this facility. And so from there, that's kind of where we stayed. We got those 3 options, and then it was a matter of there were some other things going on in the county at that time. So we've been revisited with the commission as far as options. I can't really speak to what their plan is, but in my opinion, it's a need. I think it's a have to do for us to stay successful at the detention center for the next 30 years. I think it's a have to do. As the sheriff would say, we'll get by. If we'll get it done, and he's right, we will. We'll get it done. My fear is at what cost. What cost is it gonna be that we're gonna get it done?
Yeah. Well, and speaking of that, I mean, you threw out some numbers there, right? And just as a tax-paying citizen that you are, and a tax-paying citizen, and then those that are listening to this and want to be part of the discussion, have all the way from I followed this from the beginning, the cost, the benefit analysis, and then really like come at it with an educated opinion, or somebody that's just coming into the conversation and going, well, I understand, we need a jail or whatever, but this, that's a lot of money. I mean, that's a tremendous amount of money. So if you have the opportunity to, in your position, and I'm going to say you're a professional in your position, obviously, 20 years, you're the captain of the detention center, the buck stops with you, obviously does the sheriff, but you've been tasked with this responsibility. And I believe you take this responsibility very seriously. So if you made a couple comments there about what you feel is needed and whatnot. So if there's somebody that says, $9 million or $17 million, and those just are the two options we're looking at, how do you justify the need for that to be the case? And you might have already said it, but just providing an opportunity to even expound on that a little bit, or say it a little different to the common citizen taxpayer who might not be completely aware or up to speed on all this in a Reader's Digest version. How? Like, why?
Sure. And it's hard. That's a lot of money, and I absolutely understand that. And again, what I don't want people to think is that we're trying to make jail a easy place for people. It's a matter of providing the correct tools for our officers to do our job. And so the best way I can equal it to what people might be able to understand more of is everybody sees patrol and the vehicles that they drive and the equipment that they have. So if we did the $9 million option, which would be basically go in, fix the jail back to a 1998 version of corrections, that would be the same as if you went out and re-outfitted the sheriff's office with vehicles from the 1990s, refurbished. So let's go buy him new Chevy Caprices, let's rebuild them, or Crown Victorias and rebuild them and put them in service to keep up with modern day vehicles and performance. And I mean, they'll be good at first, but I don't think they're going to be able to perform what they're going to need to perform for the duration that they're going to need to. And that's what the jail is. It's not going to perform. What it would do for several years, yes, but it would deteriorate quicker because it's not going to meet what we need it to meet, and it's not going to meet the standards of corrections anymore. And like I said, the expectation of what we're expected to do now has grown. What we're seeing with mental health, we didn't have 20 years ago. What we're seeing with, it's just more responsibility with more programs that we have coming in the door to rehabilitate. We didn't have those back then. We have the inmate services that come in, the CCRT teams that come in to help rehabilitate for drug usage, and the financial classes that come in to try to help these people turn their lives around. We didn't have that 20 years ago. We only have one place for that, and that room is constantly running. So we need more space to help these people rehabilitate, and we don't get that with the $9 million option. We don't get to meet those needs that so desperately a lot of these people need met. The people that need the medical units that still need to go to jail because there's victims out there. We can't just let them out because there are victims, and these people need to be in jail. But we have to meet their medical needs at the same time. We don't do that currently. So it just makes our job as corrections officers extremely hard when we don't have those tools that we need to do our job.
So do you feel like there's kind of a bottleneck then? I mean, when you're talking about the $9 million, and the option or one of the options is that 9 million, like you had mentioned, you just described. Does it then become kind of a bottleneck where you had mentioned we don't look at corrections the same way anymore? There's a greater emphasis placed on rehabilitation, where in the past maybe not so much. So like you had mentioned, services and accommodating individuals from the public that are coming in to provide services to decrease recidivism, which winds up, ultimately, if we're talking money right now, decreases the amount that the taxpayer has to pay out to rehouse.
Correct.
It's the same offender multiple times, when if there was something that could to change that, and let's say these programs are one way that can happen, or if it's somebody with a mental health that they can be separated for whatever time's necessary, be accommodated. Now, of course, you can't do anything about what the state of Kansas is doing or whatever, but I'm sure you probably do keep an eye on some of that, because the complications that you experience with, well, it would be nice if somebody that came in here with a mental health crisis then could be accommodated through a mental health facility. Not
Right.
that it takes it off your back, but it also provides that person with the necessary things that they need in order to not be a returning individual for you, right? So thinking on these terms, and then there's that second option, and you didn't talk a lot about the second option, but why for you? If I was the same person sitting here saying, okay, I understand what you're saying about the 9 million option and the negatives to that, what are the positives to the $17 million option, hypothetically, and how do you see that this is necessary to further on? And like I said, you might have already covered it, but just an opportunity to cover that again in a Reader's Digest version of why Captain Huntley, why do we need the $17 million option?
Because it's going to give us the tools we need to be successful, to meet the needs of the people that are they're going to be confined in our custody and our care, and we're not going to be scrambling to figure out how we're going to house somebody that needs to be on oxygen. We're not going to be scrambling to house somebody who's going through a mental health crisis that wants to hurt themselves, and we don't have anywhere to put them. We're not going to be scrambling to house somebody because all of our cells are broken, because we have, I think as of today, we have 12 cells that are out of commission because they're maintenance issues. The doors are broken, or plumbing are broken. There's so many various reasons, other than the maintenance issues but we have the disciplinary problems that have been on the rise since, that we're seeing more and more of more and more people that are willing to be combative with law enforcement, willing to fight us, and we need to have special management cells for those individuals to separate those from the population. The $17 million option provides us with the tools we need to be successful long term for the next 30 years. That is my professional opinion, working inside of this facility for the last 20 years, is that absent that, I think we are going to be set up for failure.
Yeah. And we talk too, you talk about government spending versus government investment. And I think sometimes it's missed on people that you can go in and you can put a new roof on a place and you can do some things that you need to do. But ultimately, 10 years from now, we're going to need to do something different. So if we investing, of course, obviously, one is spending the money to bring it up to speed. And the next one would be investing the money for a long-term solution, and check all those boxes for you. Agreed?
Yeah. And, and the other thing is prices to do things only go up.
Yeah.
So whatever we don't do today is going to cost 3 times more 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And we're just going to wish we would have done this today instead of 10 years from now. Yeah. So I think and like I said, 17 million is a lot of money, but it's going to be more in 5 years. It's going to be more in 10 years. So there's never going to be a good time to do it, and I know that. But unfortunately, in my opinion, it's a need.
Yeah. And we were talking earlier about some of the things that are at the facility that you feel are in dire need of improvement. When we talk about this, and I just want to come full circle here. When we talk about officers that are serving, that have, it's I suppose this. Detention is something that does not come in the purview of a lot of people, right? We know the officers out there on the beat, they're doing what they need to do. Somebody does something that requires that law enforcement step in to protect and serve the rest of us in the community that choose not to make those same decisions. And then they go to the detention center. And there's not a lot of focus placed on, this is my opinion, the detention center in and of itself, because it's a forgotten place.
Yeah.
But when it comes to staffing and the safety of staff, and I mean, really that's where my focus is at, is safety of our staff, the men and women that choose to serve in that way, even though at times it might be somewhat thankless,
yeah.
or maybe not as prestigious. I mean, I'm sure you deal with that, right?
Absolutely.
Just knowing all that, and let's say I'm that same person. A last question on the same person deal of just understanding, why do we need to do anything? Why not just do nothing?
Why not do nothing? Well, for one, it is statute that the sheriff has to house prisoners. And we have to house them in humane conditions. At some point, the jail will enter a level to where it's not humane to house these people. We have to right now. As a matter of fact, we have to let my inmate workers have to come to a different area of the facility to shower because their shower's broken and the parts have been on order for 2 months. And we're trying to get it fixed. We just can't get the parts. So we have to every night let them come out into the holding area so they can take their showers. What happens if that shower goes down? At some point, we have to be responsible for the people we're in care of. And so I think it's a moral issue at that point. And I don't think I don't think you can do nothing. I just don't even, I don't even think that's ever entered my mind just because I don't see that as an option. Doing nothing isn't an option because I guess so there are some jails that have been closed. I've heard of those stories, and the sheriff has to house those prisoners in other counties. They have to pay a lot of money for that. And I don't think that's an option. In order to house inmates in other counties, first of all, you have to find the counties that will take them, because that's really difficult to do. They're not going to be able to take all of them. You got to spread them out, and then you have to go get them for court. So that's just a logistical nightmare. But yeah, I just don't see that. I just don't see that as a possibility.
There's no option. Something has to be done.
Something has to be done.
Nothing can't be done. Yeah. What we do is the question moving forward.
Yeah, right? I mean, if there isn't a intervention, we're just going to have to throw a lot of money at repairs, and that's what it'll be. We'll just chase repairs on our own. We won't pay for a remodel. We won't pay for. We'll continue to fix things, and spend a lot of money doing it.
Yeah. Okay, and then I've got one more question before I ask you the final question. There was some discussion that took place when it came to federal inmates, and I know there's some confusion, not amongst you, obviously, in law enforcement and how that's been articulated to the public, but I think it's important. So correct me if I'm wrong here, but every inmate that is housed in the detention center, there's a reimbursement rate for that. At a
Yes.
municipal level, it might be minuscule. Let's say there's just not it's not a high rate.
Yeah.
Some discussion has been, hey, do we increase this or not? But even then, like Sheriff Gay said, you're pulling from the same taxpayer. So, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul. But then there's the opportunity, and it is sadly as to call it an opportunity. There's an opportunity for us to get a higher reimbursement rate, which means ultimately that the jail is reimbursed or compensated at a greater level than it costs to actually house the inmate for us. Not a lot, but a little, right? Because they're a federal inmate and the federal government is paying. Although that all money comes out of the same pot. If you're talking about the federal budget pulling from 300 and so many million people in the United States versus Harvey County's budget, which is pulling from 30,000 people, and I mean, not all of them would be tax-paying citizens, obviously. So we've kind of ran into a problem from what I understand, hearing you in the town hall and also Chad Gay a few times when we did the update, is that, we quote unquote make some money, but the reality is more revenue comes into the coffers, if you want to look at it that way, or the county is reimbursed at a higher level based upon a federal inmate. So it's advantageous or it's beneficial to us to be able to work that program in a way, because ultimately by housing a federal inmate or housing 5 federal inmates, it's potentially paying for the stay or what it would cost for our own inmates here locally.
Yeah.
So it seems like that would be a beneficial program to maintain, but there's a problem with that now. And just tying that into, you mentioned jails get shut down. Well, the federal government is the one that usually comes in to say, hey, wait, this is not a situation that we're going to allow to continue. So I don't know if I'm marrying those two together in an inappropriate way, but just asking the question for you to explain somewhat of that problem that we're facing. And then is that just a precursor to the inevitable of saying, hey, this just is not going to work anymore?
So yeah, we house for the federal marshals, and we do get reimbursed at $85 a day per inmate. We used to house around 25 to 30 inmates per day for them. As of today, we're at 10. There's multiple reasons why we're losing our federal inmates. Sumner County just picked up a federal contract, and they're a newer facility. So I think the marshals are putting more people over there. Our facility is aging. They get a lot of complaints from their prisoners about some of the conditions of our facility. So that's part of it. I don't know that. I don't believe in there. If something isn't done, the maintaining of a federal contract is probably not possible. As far as with that contract, we are subject to federal inspection, and they do come in every year in the U.S. Marshals and do an inspection, and they do ding us on things when things need to be fixed, and we do our best. There's a lot of things that I've been on the working on list every year, trying to get things fixed. As far as, I don't know that they can shut us down, but they can pull their inmates. That is one thing they can do. I don't know that we're on the verge of that yet, but they are definitely. I mean, we've never been this low in the 20 years that I've worked there. We've never been this low on federal inmates. So I think the writing's on the wall, in my opinion, that they are relocating their prisoners to another facility. And I've talked to the marshals down there about what's going on. They won't just flat out say they want to keep us as a contract, but I think we're more of a as needed basis at this point.
Yeah. Not the go-to no more.
Right.
Okay, well, I appreciate you coming out on the program. I appreciate your time. I appreciate everything you do in your service. I really do, Captain Huntley. I really do. I've had multiple sheriff's officers out here in the past. I'm glad that now we've extended it to you as far as what the role that you participate in making sure our community is safer. I can't imagine the depth of knowledge you must have, the depth of relationships you must have built, the time, the energy, the effort just to be in a position 20 years after your start date to be the captain, right, of the facility and ensure that it happens and it goes the way it's supposed to go day to day. With all that being said, I always, if you've watched the program, anybody watched the program knows that I give the guest the last word to speak directly to the hearts and the minds of anybody listening. And I'd like to extend that opportunity to you to tell anybody and everybody what's on your mind.
It's National Corrections Officer Week, so I'd like to thank all the corrections officers out there for their service to their communities, and keep doing what you're doing, because though you're unseen, you are appreciated by many. Outside of that, I appreciate being brought on the show and being allowed to kind of tell the story of the detention center and where we're going. Hopefully we are heading in a direction to resolve the issues, and kind of let the public know what's going on with everything, and get some things fixed.
Yeah. All right. Well, I appreciate you, Captain Huntley. I'd like to tell everybody, thanks for listening to this episode of HC Talk. As always, I was your host, Lance Gormley, and our special guest on the program today was Captain Brian Huntley from the Harvey County Sheriff's Office. Thank you.
Thank you.